Hello, and welcome to the 30th talk in the NOAA Environmental Leadership Seminar Series. The goal of these seminars is to share examples of NOAA's leading role in environmental science by those who lead it and make it happen. I am Hernan Garcia, and I'll be your host today. First, I would like to thank the NOAA Science Council for sponsoring these seminars and the team which I work with. Kathy Boser, which is in the Outreach Library in the NOAA Central Library with NOAA OER, Sandra Clark, who's a business analyst with NOAA necessitates, and Rob Levy, who is the NOAA Studio Production Manager. Next, I would like to say a few logistics. All online attendees are muted. We will have a Q&A at the end of the seminar, and online attendees may post their questions into the Adobe Connect Q&A box at any time. And we will get to as many questions as we can at the end. John Moore will assist with the Q&A. To access closed captions, you can click on the closed caption button at the top of the Adobe Connect screen. And this seminar is being recorded for later viewing. We thank our captioner, Tracy Steele. Okay. Today we have Benjamin Ben Friedman, as we know him, is NOAA's Deputy Under Secretary for Operations. He has served in this position since 2016, longer than anyone in NOAA's history. He is responsible for overseeing the programmatic and day-to-day management of the agency's core national and international operations. Ben is a vocal champion for workplace engagement, culture, diversity, and inclusivity. And if I may add, NOAA is lucky to have him working for the nation that we serve every day. Ben, the mic is yours.
All right. Thank you so much, Hernan, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here to present at this month's NOAA Environmental Leadership Seminar. This is a great series. I really appreciate Hernan's work in this, and I'm really happy to be here again to present. So I've been asked today to talk for about 40 or 45 minutes and to focus on management and leadership issues based on some of my previous talks on the subject, and also kind of a view from the top, basically big issues going on around NOAA. So here is the agenda. As I mentioned, the two big areas I'm going to talk about are leadership issues and kind of big issues around NOAA. On the leadership issue side, I have given a number of talks at various levels on leadership and management in the past. This is kind of a mishmash of previous talks I've given. So if you've heard some of this before, I apologize. Hopefully it'll reinforce some of the areas that I like to talk about. And certainly the final issues, the big issues around NOAA will be a new subject area. So as far as the leadership issues, I'm going to briefly talk just about my own path to leadership. I'm going to then provide some advice for those wanting to get into management or leadership roles, and a kind of my management philosophy. On big issues around NOAA, I've basically picked four. These are some big issues that we're focused on right now at headquarters. They're things that I'm working on. They're things that the political team is working on and that many around NOAA are working on. It includes asset recapitalization. This is basically facilities and ships and planes and satellites that we're recapitalizing right now. Second, I'm going to talk about BIL and IRA. As many of you, I'm sure, know, we received over $6 billion to get out the door over a 5-year period as part of these great pieces of legislature. So I'm going to talk about where we are with that. Then I'm going to turn to employee experience. This is really the kind of diversity and inclusion and burnout and other issues facing our employees right now, and kind of what we're doing at headquarters to try to address that. And finally, I'm going to talk about BAS, which is the Business Application Solution. This is the new finance system that the Department of Commerce is putting in place that's impacting a lot of people right now. At the end, we will have a Q&A period. I am really an open book. We can talk about anything. We can talk about Michigan's dominant performance last night in the National Football Championship, or we can talk about less interesting things like things going around NOAA. It's really up to you. But start thinking about questions now because you'll have an opportunity to ask it at the end. Okay. I thought I'd start just by talking a little bit about my own role. I realize that many folks don't really understand the organization of NOAA. I can't imagine why. Looking at this organization chart, it's so simple. But basically, I am the top career official at NOAA, and I oversee all the line offices other than NIMS, the Fisheries Service. I work with them quite a bit, but I don't directly oversee them. The reason for that is that NIMS is overseen by a political appointee, and so I can't supervise a political appointee. But I do supervise the rest of the line offices. If you look to the right of the chart there, I also supervise most of the staff offices, including the CIO, CFO, CAO, etc. I'm also the person that sends out lots of emails. You've probably seen a lot of my emails. They're the ones that you probably immediately put in the trash. But maybe you read them sometimes, and I send out emails about things going on around NOAA and things that are pertinent to the workforce. So what does my normal day look like? Well, it's really hard to say what my normal day looks like because there is no normalcy to it. I'm often focusing on the crisis of the day. I work closely with the political team to make sure that we're supporting their priorities. I work closely with the Department of Commerce, OMB, and the Hill on what our priorities are. I deal with operational issues and serious operational issues that are arising each day. I handle a lot of budget and facilities type issues. It's really kind of new issues every day. And there's meetings, lots and lots of meetings. But in all seriousness, it's really an honor to be in this role. It's very challenging, but it's also very rewarding. And I get to work with amazing people like you every day. How did I actually get into this role? Sometimes I ask myself that. I have been here for almost 8 years now. And how did I get myself into this? So I'm going to kind of talk about my path to my current role. So my educational path is unusual, I think, and it really shows how my career has been formed. I have an undergraduate degree in molecular biology, and you can see my alma maters there, Vanderbilt and Emory. I then went on and got a law degree at Emory. I also got a master's of theological studies at Emory. So those are 3 very distinct areas. I basically followed my passions and my interests, and I followed what moved me. And that's kind of been consistent with what I do in my career. And we'll get back to this as we're talking about ways to move into management. But my career has also been similarly diverse. Maybe the first thing I should talk about is why did I join the government? So I have been in the government now for over 30 years. I can't believe it's been that long. The time passes quickly, but it is over 30 years now. And I joined the government initially really in search of meaning and purpose. I certainly had opportunities in the private sector where I could have made a lot more money as a lawyer. Those positions didn't really interest me, and I was much more interested in seeing what I could do for the country and seeing what I could do to kind of make a positive impact in the world. And I thought the government was a good avenue for that. So that's why I joined, and that's kept me here. But really, a big part of why I've stayed is that for me, it's an excellent balance. It's an excellent work-life balance. I've been able to raise a family and spend a lot of time with my family while also having a very interesting and exciting career. And so that combined with the meaning have really kept me in government. And I'm sure many people on right now are in the government and have made the similar decisions. So I probably am preaching to the choir. But as far as my career goes, after law school, I joined the Department of Justice. I initially was in the organized crime and racketeering section. That is exactly what it sounds like. I worked on organized crime and racketeering cases at the national level. Most of my cases were out of Las Vegas. I handled one very large case there. I was in the office for about 4 years, and frankly, I got tired of the travel. And so I ended up joining the U.S. Attorney's Office in Washington, D.C. So for those who don't know how the DOJ system works, the U.S. Attorney's offices are basically the local branches of the Department of Justice in each of the major cities around the country. You can kind of think of it as maybe like a WFO in the Weather Service. It's kind of a local branch. And so I was in the U.S. Attorney's office in D.C. It's the largest office in the country. It handles all the kind of local and federal crime within D.C. I tried a lot of cases, some 60-odd cases, including homicide cases, sex offense cases, everything in between, white-collar cases. And then I ended up going into management. And I started management kind of at a low level. I was a deputy training assistant first, and then I kind of moved up to trial sections, starting in the misdemeanor trial section, which is kind of the lowest level trial section. I was chief of that office, ultimately moving to other trial sections and ultimately overseeing the major crime section, which was overseeing all the major crimes in DC. And then I moved to become the special counsel of the U.S. Attorney, which is kind of one of the higher level management positions in the U.S. Attorney's office in DC. And then in 2010, I made a huge change, and I made a huge shift, and I came to NOAA. And so it's really kind of two distinct parts of my career. And why did that happen? Because I came to the realization that if I was going to spend my entire career in government, and I had come to that realization, that I didn't have to stay in one place, and I could move around, and I could try different things. And I'd always wanted to try environmental issues. An opportunity came up at NOAA to become basically a mid-level manager. I started off as the chief of the enforcement section in the general counsel's office, doing enforcement cases. I then became deputy general counsel. I then moved to the Department of Commerce, where I was an assistant general counsel overseeing employment law, litigation, and oversight for the department. And then I came into this role about 8 years ago. So what can be learned from all this? Well, for one thing, you don't need one particular background to get into management. You really can follow your interests and your passions. You can try new things, and that will not prohibit you from moving up the chain. Second of all, I moved around a lot. I didn't stay in one role very long. This current position is by far the longest I've ever stayed in one role. I've been in the government, as I mentioned, about 30 years, a little bit over. And during that time, I've had about 20 roles at both the Department of Justice and at Commerce. Now, some of those were natural transitions at the U.S. Attorney's Office, where every 6 months they would switch you to a new role when you began. But a lot of that was me trying new things and kind of pursuing interests. And then maybe the third and most important thing is that I often went against the grain, and I took risks. I repeatedly did things that people thought were unusual with my career, were different with my career, and I kind of pursued my passions. Now, I'm going to get back to that theme in a little bit, so I won't spend too much time on it there or right now, but I think those are some things that you can kind of learn from my career path. So that's enough about me. Let's talk about maybe you and kind of management and leadership issues. So the first thing I want to talk about is whether a management position is right for you. And let me first start by saying that there's a difference between management and leadership. So you can play a leadership role in many different ways. You can be a leader in your family. You can be a leader in your office. You can be a leader in your community. That is separate and distinct from being a manager. Manager has a certain connotation. It means you're managing, people, issues within an office setting. And the most important thing that I can emphasize in this regard is that management is its own thing. It's its own craft. Just because someone is a good scientist or a good lawyer or a good administrator doesn't mean they're going to make a good manager. They're very different skills. It's kind of like being a professor. We've all been through college. We've all seen where somebody might be a great researcher. That doesn't make them a good teacher. And the same is definitely true for management. I've seen that throughout my career. Many people go into management because they think it's just the next thing to do. They've reached a point in their career when they think like, okay, this is the next natural progression. But that isn't always the best decision, because, as I said, just because somebody excels in one area doesn't mean that they're going to excel in management. Meanwhile, I can tell you that some of the people that I respect most in the world never went into management. I'll give you an example. I used to, as I mentioned, handle sex offense cases. These are some of the worst cases you could possibly imagine. Think child sex offense cases, rapes, etc. I handled those cases for about 3 years. Very difficult, very, very difficult cases, both personally and dealing with the victims in the community. I know people that have worked in those cases for 25, 30 years. After 3 years, I was completely burned out and I had to move on. But some people have such a passion for it and they have such a drive to work with the victims and the communities that are impacted by these terrible crimes that they spend their entire careers in that. And I have just huge respect for those people, and they find deep meaning in life. Similarly, at NOAA, I know a lot of scientists who have just stayed as scientists because they have no interest in management. They're incredible scientists, and that's what they want to do. And I have, again, deep respect for them. So I say this because it's often the case, I think, that staying with what you love can have its own success path and be very gratifying. Not everyone needs to go into management. Okay, so let's say you decide you want to go into management. How do you get there? Well, first thing, I think I have to acknowledge that it is a mixture of luck and skill. I can tell you that I've been turned down for as many or more positions than I've been accepted into. I've been in a lot of different management roles over the years. I've been a federal manager now for 20 years. But I've also been turned down for a lot of roles. And now, having done a lot of interviews in this regard, I can tell you that it's often just about who is the right fit at the right time and who applies for a position at the right time. Somebody can be an incredible candidate, but if somebody happens to apply at the same time who is a better candidate or just a better fit for whatever is needed at that moment, that other person might get selected. So I tell you this because you shouldn't get discouraged if you've tried a couple times and it hasn't worked out. Sometimes you just got to keep trying until the fit is right. So next thing I'll mention is taking risks with your career. So I am constantly amazed in the government in particular, but I think it's true everywhere, that people will stay in one spot their entire career and expect to move up, and they get frustrated when they haven't moved up into a management role. And I will say that I think this is very hard, and it's hard for a couple different reasons. It's hard because it may be years. I mean, assuming you're in some kind of unit or division, there may be only a handful of management positions even available. Those could be filled for years, so you may have to wait years to even have an opportunity. And then when those positions come open, everyone around you is going to be competing for them, and somebody from the outside might end up getting it because they are the better candidate at the moment. And then even if you do move up, you're going to have a very limited skill set because you've only been in one position your entire career. So staying in one place is, if you have a desire to kind of move into management and move up the management chain, isn't always the best way to do it. I can tell you, and I mentioned this before, that in my own career, I've taken a lot of risks. I did a lot of firsts. I was the first community prosecutor in Washington, D.C., which is somebody who goes out into the community and works in the community, fighting crime from within the community. No one else wanted to do it at the time. I volunteered because I thought it was an interesting and exciting opportunity. I was the first felony domestic violence prosecutor in Washington, D.C., because, again, I thought it was an interesting opportunity. Coming to NOAA, people thought I was nuts. I had moved up the chain at the Department of Justice. I had a lot of opportunities there, and people were like, why are you making this big switch now? And I was like, because I'm interested and I'm excited about the opportunity. So taking some chances, getting out of your comfort zone is I think, a good thing. And I've always found that if you follow your desires and your passions, you're going to do well at wherever you go. And that's going to be noticed, and you're going to be able to move into the management position. And so the last couple of things I'll note in this regard is that there's really, even though it's taking risks, if you're staying within the government, there's relatively low risk. You get to keep your pay and your benefits. If the job isn't good, then you can always move to another one. So it's relatively low risk. And it's good to get a variety of experience because I can tell you that it's always nice when you're interviewing somebody for a management position when they've had a variety of experience they're coming into the job from. Okay, the second thing I'm going to mention is the importance of relationships. And people always talk about relationships, but I have a certain spin on it. So the first thing I'll say is that I'm not talking about networking. Networking to me kind of makes me cringe. It implies, I think, a certain insincerity that people are just trying to get to know certain people to help themselves move into a certain role. And I can tell you, having been a manager for a long time and now in a very senior role, we can tell when people are trying to network, and it's not the most comfortable feeling. So when I talk about relationships, I'm talking about real relationships. People really, connecting really with people that you work with. And I can tell you, for example, how did I get into this current role? Well, I worked with Kathy Sullivan before she was administrator of NOAA. She was an assistant secretary. I was the deputy general counsel at NOAA, and I was leading an investigation into issues within the Weather Service. This ended up being a big deal. She was the political who was in charge of it, and we worked on that matter together. We worked very closely for a long time. We went to the Hill a lot to brief congressional members about it, and we got to know each other really well. And so when this position came open, even though it was unusual for a lawyer, I'm the first lawyer to have been in this role, she thought of me. And so that relationship building really helped me to get into this role. I also am a big believer in having relationships with everyone from the lowest to the highest. First of all, it's the right thing to do. And as a human being, it's a good thing to do. But also, you really don't know where people are going to end up. And I can tell you, I have so many examples of people who have ended up in these incredible positions around government. It's a small world here, and people who I never know would get there. I'll just use a quick example that just immediately came to mind because this is in the news right now. The case being tried against Donald Trump in district court is being tried by Tanya Chutkin. I know Tanya very well because I used to work on cases with her. And then it's on appeal right now. The immunity issue is on appeal. And I just noticed that the judge, Florence Pan, who's hearing this case, is a close friend of mine. And I work closely with her at the U.S. Attorney's Office. The point is, you don't know where people are going to end up. I supervise some of these folks, and then they go to these incredible positions. So it's very important, and it also goes both ways. So it can really hurt you if you're not nice to people. And an example I'll give that I often think of is that when I first started at the U.S. Attorney's Office, I was kind of the lowest of the low. I was in the misdemeanor section, which this is before I was chief of the misdemeanor section. I was just trying misdemeanors. It's the first trial unit you start in. And I just started. The top of that office is the U.S. Attorney. It's a political appointee. There's like 700 people in that office. It's a big office. And at the time, the U.S. Attorney was leaving, and she wanted to get a deanship at a local university here, at a law school at a local university here. I had a friend who happened to be on the hiring panel who called me and said, "What do you think of this person?" And I gave the honest truth, which is that the person at the time was not particularly friendly, not just to me, but to many people. Everyone kind of knew it. She was a difficult personality. And didn't have the best reputation in the office. And I was honest with my friend about that. And his response was, "Okay, we're not going to hire." And I was like, wait a second. I'm just this young attorney. Like you're just asking my opinion. He's like, "No, that's not somebody we want in the law school." And I was like, wow. Okay. So I learned my lesson there that you never know how things are going to come back to haunt you. So I think it's important to start with your peers, form relationships with your peers. You'll be amazed at where those people end up going. But again, be friendly, form real relationships with people, and it often leads to good things. Okay, the final thing I'm going to talk about here is kind of knowing yourself and whether you're unwittingly or wittingly holding yourself back. So I've seen this again and again in my career with people I've mentored. People often have a fear of moving up the chain. Some people call it a fear of failure. I actually call it a fear of success. I think people fear sometimes what they don't know. They fear the responsibility that comes with it. And I think oftentimes people fear getting out of their comfort zone. Maybe they never saw themselves in these types of roles, or their family or friends are not in these types of roles. So they're getting kind of above where they thought they'd get. And there's that fear of success. And a common piece of this is what I call the imposter syndrome. Now, imposter syndrome these days, I think most people have heard of it, and there's a lot of talk about it. I can tell you when I started giving these lectures, no one had heard about it, and it was kind of a new thing. I had seen it myself in my own career, and I actually call it the overachiever syndrome because for some reason, overachievers seem to be rife with imposter syndrome. I'm not entirely sure why, but it has something to do with them thinking that their own success is due to luck and hard work, but maybe not their own natural skills. But I have seen a lot of overachievers that have this, and NOAA is full of overachievers. An extreme example that comes to my mind is Vince Foster. This is kind of an old example. He was White House counsel under Clinton. Very sad story. He ended up committing suicide. There was obviously a lot of press about it at the time. He left a note saying, and I have this, written. I made mistakes from ignorance, inexperience, and overwork. I was not meant for the job or the spotlight of public life in Washington. This is a guy who was considered one of the best attorneys in the country, extremely well respected, brilliant. He did not see himself that way. And he thought he was an imposter, and it led to his own downfall. And so, I can tell you, almost everyone I've talked to in a senior management role feels this at some point. It is not unusual at all. And if you're feeling this and you feel like it's holding you back, all I can tell you is that you have to challenge yourself, ask yourself if you're holding yourself back, and basically commit to not letting it hold yourself back. I have often just told myself, like, don't let fear get in the way of your dreams or your career. Just keep pushing and do things even if you're scared, and just acknowledge you're scared and move forward. At least that's the way I've been able to deal with it. But I note this because, again, it's something I've seen again and again. Okay, so let's say you've gotten to be in a management role, you're in a management role, and now you're thinking, okay, how do I become a good leader? I told you that management is its own skill, but what does this really mean? Well, there are lots of excellent books out there on management, none of which I've read. And I can tell you that I've learned most of my management skills, I think, through trial and error. Again, I started small. I've been doing this for a long time. I've learned from peers. I've learned from my mistakes. I've learned from seminars, and yes, occasionally I'll read a thing or two. But it really, I think any good management text will tell you that it starts with knowing yourself. You really have to know yourself and your own style, your strengths and your weaknesses, and play to those strengths and weaknesses. And I think I've done that. And so what I'm going to tell you now is how I've learned to manage and what's worked for me. It won't necessarily work for everyone, but it's worked really well for me. And it's something that I think you can think about as you think about your own strengths and weaknesses. So my form of management, I have termed it Zen management. And again, this is something that I have formed over a very long period of time. I did this when I was younger in my career, supervising both at DOJ and at NOAA in lesser positions. I wasn't sure if it would apply in this role where I'm literally overseeing, a workforce of 12,000 and another 10,000 contractors. But it turns out it does work, and it has been very effective for me. So what is Zen management? Well, it really starts with a very basic concept, which is I'm ultimately just trying to create an environment where employees want to come to work, where they can be themselves, where they have a voice, where they're engaged. And I find that when I can create this right environment, people succeed and the mission succeeds. So it's really about creating the environment, not micromanaging, not necessarily drilling down on every single detail, but creating a right management within an office and within, in this case, a NOAA. So what are some of the basic tenets of Zen management? First of all, some basic assumptions you have to make about your employees, which is that they're smart and they're hardworking and they care. And when you come to employees with that and you make that assumption, I have almost always found that they live up to those expectations. When you doubt them from the start, when you micromanage them, when you constantly question them, then they start to have doubts and they are not living up to their full potential. But when you assume they're good, they often live up to that. I give employees responsibility and assume they're going to do a good job. And again, I do not micromanage them, which I find kills productivity and ambition and creativity. And then I give credit. I always give folks credit for their work. I don't take it myself. I let them do their jobs and I let them succeed. I listen to employees about their concerns and I try to give them space to grow and let them take initiative. I'm happy when good people leave. And I know this is kind of a funny tenet, but I'm always surprised when I see other managers not have that and not and try to keep their good people and not let them move to the next level. I'm always excited when good people leave. It means I've been a good manager. It means they've grown and they're trying new things. And I've often found that then I have friends and colleagues in other places that can support me. And a lot of the best people come back because they've liked working with you. Creating diversity. This is another really basic tenet for me. Surrounding myself with a diversity of voices, surrounding myself who have different views than me. People, and I encourage people to disagree with me. This is a hard thing to do as a manager. It takes, I think, a certain level of maturity. It doesn't mean I'm always going to agree with people, but I want people to give me their thoughts and their concerns. Why? Because it avoids blind spots and you end up coming up with much, much better decisions. There's been a ton of literature on this, but I found it in my own career as well, that when I surround myself with people with different views and backgrounds, I come up with better products. People think of things that I'm not thinking of and challenge me in ways that I haven't been challenged before. So that basic diversity, I think, is extremely important to the success of any office. And then finally, it's important and this is kind of on the flip side, that when there are really poor performers or people that are kind of creating a huge havoc within an organization, you need to take action. And you've got to do it quickly because people who really are performers or really you just can't bring them to that next level really end up undermining the entire organization. And you don't want that. So what are the results for Zen management in my own experience? It increases productivity. It increases creativity. It increases retention of employees. And ultimately, it improves the mission and why we're here. Finally, just personally, I can tell you as a manager, it makes you look really good because when your people are successful, you're successful. And again, I have found that when I can make my staff successful and the employees successful, I don't need to take credit for it. I still look good because the entire mission is doing well. So why do I call this Zen management? Because for me, the goal is basically to have nothing to do. I've managed and been in a lot of management positions, and I get to this point where I've given responsibility to others. I'm no longer, I've created a positive environment. The office is humming, and I no longer have enough to do. So I need to move on to the next office that has challenges to try to improve that next office. So in other words, the goal is not to be, but the goal is to be, not to do, which is a very Zen concept. Okay, I'm going to stop there with leadership and management issues. I hope you found this kind of an interesting conversation. And now I'm going to move to a totally different subject, which is big issues across NOAA. So there are a lot of big issues around NOAA, and these are the kind of things that are really taking up my time right now. And again, the political leadership's time. These are things that are going on around headquarters. I picked 4 areas. I could pick a lot more, and if people have questions about other things going on around NOAA, I'm happy to address them. But these are some of the things that are really occupying my time right now. Okay, we are going to start with, oh, wait a second, I'm sorry, I skipped a slide. We're going to start with asset recapitalization. So when I say asset recapitalization, I'm talking about, our assets within NOAA, facilities, ships, planes, satellites. I can tell you that there has never been a time at NOAA that I know of historically when we have so much going on in this regard. It is very exciting because we have a lot of new platforms and facilities coming online. It's also scary, one, because it's hard to get these things online. They're very expensive, and you want to do what's best for the public and the mission. It's also, for each one of these things, you have to think that it's not just a matter of getting a new ship or plane or satellite. It's training the people to operate the new ship or plane or satellite and make it function. So there's a lot that comes with bringing these new assets online. So I thought I'd just kind of go through a list to give you a sense of what's going on right now. So on the facility side, piers, we have a number of new piers coming online. The biggest one is the Newport Pier, Newport, Rhode Island. This has been years in the making. We are moving our entire Atlantic coast operations for ships to Newport. We're building a very expensive pier to support that. It is on the Navy base in Newport. And there's a lot of excitement around that. The contract, we're working with the Navy on the contract. It's already been accepted. The money's to the Navy. Groundbreaking hasn't started, but it will start soon. We also have a new pier in Ketchikan, Alaska. This is a single ship pier. It's kind of state of the art. It's a floating pier, so that gives us more access up in Alaska. And we're rebuilding a pier in Charleston, South Carolina, right now as well, and that's underway as well. We also have a lot of facilities focus in the upper Northwest right now. We had some fisheries offices close up there. Mukilteo, which was a small research center, closed. And then the big one was Montlake, which is a large fisheries office up there, several hundred employees, Fisheries Science Center. It's closing because a large highway is going in next door, and we had to basically figure out what to do. So there's a lot going up in that region. This is the second largest part or office within NOAA. We have over 1,000 employees up in the Seattle region. We're moving some assets to the large Seattle campus. We're moving some to Manchester, which is a campus we have close by. And then we're going to be building a new we are going to be leasing a new state-of-the-art building for science. And that's out for review right now. We expect for a large player like University of Washington or others to compete for that. And so there's a lot of excitement around that. SSMC, you may have seen a lot of renovations going on around the Silver Spring campus. But bigger than that, our lease is about to end here in the next few years. So we are now looking at recompeting the lease. With the return to office, I'm sure most people know that we have not seen these buildings filled. So we're looking at either consolidating into less buildings on this campus or possibly moving to a new campus. That's all being evaluated right now. This obviously is huge. It's a game changer for NOAA headquarters. And we're working a lot of that with senior leadership right now. So that just gives you a sense of some of the facilities things we're going on right now. Ships. We have a lot of new ships coming on online, and this is super exciting. This has been in my time. Right as I started, we started getting funding from the Hill, a budget of around $75 million a year to start recapitalizing our aging fleet. I'm sure many people know that our fleet is really aging. It has an average age of 40, 50 years. We have ships that are self-destructing. The Hialakai went out a couple years ago. We're struggling with the Rainier right now. And we need to bring new ships online. And luckily, we're doing that. So there's 3 different classes of ships we're bringing online. There's the Class A ships. Those are under construction right now. The first we hope to get by the end of this year. That's the Oceanographer. It's a large multi-use ship. Its primary focus will be research. Secondary will be fishing and charting and surveying. We have a second one of those Class A ships, hopefully coming in late 25 or 26, more likely now. We also have Class B ships. The contract has been awarded for these. Those are coming next. The primary purpose of these ships is charting and surveying. The secondary purpose is research. You will see that all these ships are now multi-purpose. That was part of the innovation as we were able to actually buy our own new ships. And then Class C ships are the next ones that will be coming online after Class B. These are going to be primarily fisheries vessels with charting and surveying as their secondary purpose, and we're beginning to work on those. Planes. A lot going on with planes. We are building a new G550 with Gulfstream. This is replacing the G4 high altitude Hurricane Hunter that is an aging platform that we need to replace. We're expecting the new G550 by January 25 to be ready for the 25 hurricane season. And then we have a second G550 that we hope to get in, or a second platform, G550 platform, coming in the works as well. We received funding for that. This will be the first time we have two Gulfstream high altitude planes. It's going to allow us to do a lot more really interesting scientific work and operational work as well. We have a second King Air, or I'm sorry, not a second, a new King Air that's online and coming to us this month. And then we're replacing our P3s. These are our Hurricane Hunters, the big old planes that we have, affectionately known as Miss Piggy and Kermit. They're really old planes. We've done everything we can to keep them going, but they need to be replaced, and we're replacing them with a different type of plane, a C-130. We're expecting those in the next 5 years or so. We already have contracts in place to begin work on those. And no worries, we've already begun meeting with Disney to figure out how to name these. I don't think we're going to name them Miss Piggy and Kermit again. That has yet to be determined, but we will come up with good names, and Disney seems amenable to that. Okay, satellites. There's two main types of satellite, but the one I'll talk about here is geostationary satellites. This is the main geostationary satellite we have is the GO satellite. This has been a series of satellites, RSTU. So there's four of them that we've launched over the last several years. The last one is being launched in April from Cape Canaveral. There's a lot of excitement around that, but that's the last of the GO satellites. So we're working on the next generation of GEO satellites, and the program is called GeoXO. That's begun to be funded, and there's a lot of excitement around that as well. So that is just a quick breakdown of some of the new resources and assets we have coming online. Lot of work on all of those. Each one of those I could spend an entire session on, but I think the takeaway here is that there's a lot of excitement here and a lot really going on in a positive way there. Okay, the next thing I was going to talk about is BIL and IRA, and I see I'm going to run out of time here soon, so I'll kind of move along. I think most people know we've received over $6 billion, $6.3 billion to be exact, in the bipartisan infrastructure legislation and the Inflation Reduction Act. This represents the largest Department of Commerce financial commitment to building climate resilience in history. We have three main buckets that this is going into: climate-ready coasts and communities, which is basically NOS, climate data and services, which is primarily the Weather Service and also some NESDIS, and then fisheries and protected resources, which is NIMS. OAR and research is part of many of these as well, but those are kind of easy buckets that we can describe them in. A lot of the infrastructure I just described is also being funded through BIL and IRA as well, so that's how we're getting so much of that infrastructure built. Just to give you a sense, in 2023, a total of $703 million was awarded in BIL grants and contract projects, and $438 million in IRA grant and contract projects. So that's $1.1 billion last year that went out the door. One small example, $53 million in grants to support 25 tribal projects in BIL funds, including dedicated tribal fish passage. Vice President Harris recently announced another $562 million in funding for scores of coastal resilience funding projects across the country, many of which are going to go to underserved communities. So a lot of excitement there. We've already announced in 2024 $700 million in IRA funding available to support important work to build resilience of communities, accelerate business to deliver coastal and ocean-based resilience products and services, and develop the workforce needed to build a climate-ready nation, and $390 million in IRA funds for tribal priorities, including fish passage, fish hatcheries, and capacity building. So a lot of excitement there. Okay, employee experience. Again, this is one I can spend a tremendous amount of time in. I'll try to move quickly so we have time for questions. Let's just say the current state of the workforce is a big concern, I think, for all senior management. There's a lot of anecdotal evidence about burnout within the workforce. We've done a survey that I think everyone's probably familiar with that indicated that a very large percentage of the workforce is feeling burned out. I think a lot of that has to do with return to work, and COVID. A lot of it has to do with diversity and inclusion issues. Again, I'll skip through some of this so we can get to questions. Let's just say that we've spent a tremendous amount of time and effort in particular areas over the years. And this has been a personal passion of mine. I think everyone who knows me knows it's been a personal passion of mine. On the burnout side, you've probably seen we've done some wellness summits. We now have an hour of wellness administrative leave that we can give folks for every pay period. We've encouraged managers not to, email in off hours and to reduce meetings. We have these stand-up days, like tomorrow there's a stand-up for equity day. I encourage everyone to take part in. On diversity and inclusion, there's been a ton here. We have the educational partnership program with minority serving institutions. We spend about $20 million a year supporting minority serving institutions around the country. We've struggled. We've supported thousands of undergrad and PhDs in our scientists in these minority serving institutions. We've struggled to get them in the door, but we've been doing a lot better recently through direct hire programs. We've got new legislation that allows us to do direct hire out of our internship and fellowship programs. And so that's really supported that. And we've seen some positive, traction here. Last year, we hired around 1,800 people. Over a third of those were diverse folks. And that's super exciting, but we still have a long way to go, and we're having retention and other issues. I'll finally just mention sexual assault, sexual harassment. There's a lot going on in this arena as well. We have been funded by Congress. We've set up an entire program. We have victim advocates across the country. We have a lot of training and exercises going on in this arena as well. So we've spent a lot of time in these particular areas, but the big thing that we're doing now is called Next, NOAA Employee Experience Transformation. It's really bringing all these things into one unit and one office so that we're looking at employee experience from the time they apply for a job to the time they leave NOAA, and looking at every step along the way and making sure people have their best experience. We have staff on board looking at this. We have an executive committee working on it. We've hired a contractor to help us working on it. It's based on the Surgeon General's framework for mental health and well-being. And you see the diagram here and what some of the focus is on. And it's just really, there's a lot of excitement about this. Ultimately, my view, we're basically trying to bring Zen management to the organization and make this a really positive place to work where people are going to be engaged and excited to be here. Okay, finally, and I'll just finish with this so we can get to questions. This is BAS, Business Application Solution. So I mention this because this is a game changer for the way we do business within NOAA. This is the new finance system that the Department of Commerce is putting in place, but it's not just finance. It's a finance system and budget system. It's a property system, and it's a grant system all in one. This is a huge, hundreds of millions of dollars across all of commerce. We're all going to be on the same platform for the first time ever. We went live on October 25th. Let's just say it's not been the smoothest transition. We've had a lot of issues. I'm sure many of you have experienced that. We're working diligently on them. We met with the Deputy Secretary yesterday. We have regular meetings across NOAA and with the department to try to troubleshoot. We're having issues with travel vouchers. We're having issues with getting funds out to our vendors and to our grantees. We're doing everything we can on it, and I'm happy to answer any questions about it. I just wanted to acknowledge it because this is something that's taking up a lot of my time right now and a lot of the time of senior managers across the board. Okay, I'm going to end there. I hope you found this presentation interesting. I hope you learned some things. We're now going to open it up for question and answer. Like I said, I am an open book. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. And I will now turn it over to our moderators.
Great. Thank you, Ben. This has been really interesting. We have a number of questions, and I'll try to be brief. The first one is, if you think of NOAA as like a football team, like the University of Michigan football team, how does that relate to leadership? Are there any ties to leadership in the work environment?
Well, it's interesting. Okay. So first of all, I should tell you, my mother went to Michigan. My father at one point taught at Michigan, and my son just graduated from Michigan. So that's why, I was rooting for Michigan. But I think there's a lot. I mean, this is just my personal view and my personal experience, having, again, been a manager at a lot of different levels with a lot of different groups over the years. I think every leadership and management role has similarities. And it really has to do with what motivates people and how you can be successful. There's different ways to do that. I have experienced all sorts of managers myself in my time. My wife is also a federal employee and a 30 plus year federal employee. She's experienced all sorts of managers, good, bad, and ugly. I have found that, when there's micromanagement and this is whether you're a coach of a football team or a low level manager or a high level manager, when you micromanage and you're overly tough and you're mean spirited and you don't trust folks and you don't come together as a team, things fall apart and you can't succeed. And, I watched Jim Harbaugh again and again and again this season talk about how that team came together. It was not just looking at the talent, it is not even close to the best talent in football. Georgia and other teams have much stronger talent across the board. You could argue Washington yesterday had stronger talent across the board, but no one played like a team like Michigan. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do within NOAA. And I'm trying to be more, frankly, I mean, I hate to use NASA as an example, but they do a really good job of this. I want this to be a place where people want to come, where it's an engaging process. People are excited to be here. They know that they're going to have, freedom to have creativity and to come up with ideas, and they're going to have a voice. And so I think that's successful wherever you are.
Great. There's here another one. I think that it deals with the fact that some parts of NOAA, and I guess that's true for other organizations, they are risk adverse. They don't want to take risks because the chop cuts your head if you should make a risky move. So how would say somebody in the workforce that has this brilliant risky ideas, but their chain of command does not want to take the risk to go forward?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think it's a balance, right? And I'm thinking of this I'll think of this from both the employee point of view and the manager point of view. From a manager point of view, and I can tell you, I've had these conversations with Dr. Spinrad, and Dr. Spinrad has said this many times. He wants people to take risks. He truly does. Sometimes in government, it's so easy to play it safe, right? I mean, it's so easy because you can just keep on doing the same thing and, hey, you get your paycheck. But we want to create an environment where people are willing to take risks and will not be punished for those risks. Again, I have seen repeatedly in what I think of as toxic workplaces where that is not the case, where every mistake is under a microscope and something bad happens and it's like, who are we going to fire? Or how can we take action against individuals who made a mistake? That is not the what we want within NOAA. It's a science organization. we need to be innovative. Now, there's some areas where we have to be conservative, right? I mean, some of our operational areas where we need 99.999% operational capacity, hey, we can't be very risky with those. But when it comes to research and certain areas where we need to push the envelope, we want people to take risks. So from a management point of view, I can tell you we're trying to change that within NOAA. From an employee point of view, I have to acknowledge that it is a balance. First of all, it depends on what the idea is, and maybe it's a good idea, maybe it's a bad idea. Ultimately, we have to allow managers to manage and decide what's going to be a priority and not a priority. I would say, though, that if you really think you have a good idea and you're struggling with that, don't be afraid to take it up the chain. I have found repeatedly, do it in a nice way, do it in an open way. Don't try to go behind your manager's back or be obnoxious or anything like that, unless you really have a bad manager who you think is going to punish you. But be open about it and just say, look, I really think this is a good idea. Do you mind if I talk to this, a more senior manager about it, just to get their thoughts? Because I have found, particularly as you go up the chain, there's more and more of an appetite for risk. That's not always the case, but I can tell you, I know the AAs really well. I know the DAAs really well, and we talk a lot about this mindset. So I'm not giving you a perfect solution. I know, it's very context specific, but that would be my advice.
Great. Thank you, Ben. You mentioned NASA earlier. NASA has a tremendous way to communicate what they do. They really do a good job. And I'll be frank when I say that if somebody asks me what NOAA is, they might not know what it is. So I wonder if you have any ideas on how to, mitigate that issue.
Not only do I have ideas, but this has been a pet peeve of mine since I came to NOAA. So again, I came from the Department of Justice, and I was surrounded by like brilliant attorneys, all sorts of Ivy Leaguers and all these people. When I said I was going to NOAA, I got a lot of blank stares. People didn't know. And even once I got here and I was doing all this cool stuff, people still didn't know. And I literally would have conversations with people who were like, oh, so NOAA, is that like, what is that, like about 200 people? Like they had no idea, and then you tell them it's a $6 billion organization with, 20,000 plus employees and contractors doing all this incredible stuff. And I truly believe we are the coolest agency in government. And it's so frustrating that people don't know what we do. So couple differences. First, you should understand NASA has an enormous budget for public facing and public affairs. And that's part of they get 1% of their budget for that. So they have like hundreds of millions of dollars a year they can spend towards this. We get this tiny little pot. So that has been a real struggle for us. We've been going to the Hill. We've been arguing for more funding. Meanwhile, I think we're really trying to focus in a number of different areas to try to get our name out there in a better way. From simple things like we've gotten finally permission from the department to use our logo in more interesting ways. So we have vendors now who can use our logo and put it on T-shirts and things like that. We've been negotiating with the Smithsonian to get some of our materials in Smithsonian museum shops. We've been talking, particularly as we talk about, I mentioned Silver Spring campus and how we, this lease is going to end. We want to build a real museum and a public-facing space at NOAA. We get requests all the time. A couple times a week, we get requests for school groups and other groups to come to NOAA. We don't have that much to show them. And so we really want to create a positive space for the public to come and really see what we do and how we do it. We're also trying to use some of what I call our charismatic programs to sell NOAA. Things like our Sanctuaries program, which is an extremely popular program. Things like our Deep Sea Exploration program, which is extremely popular. Part of the Weather Service, Hurricane Center, and others that get a lot of press. So we're trying to use those as kind of a public vehicle to show what NOAA does. I can tell you across the board, though, senior management is focused on this and is trying to figure out ways we can be creative with, frankly, not a lot of resources. So trust me, it's on our radar. we're trying, but we have limited resources.
Understood. Okay, we're coming to the hour, but let me ask one more question to end in a more positive note. How do you see NOAA as an agile institution? Because it's so big, making a little change will take a long time to take effect. And different administrations have different priorities. How you see NOAA in that realm?
So that's a good question. And frankly, that's something that I've really struggled with. And I've noticed, having been in the government so long now, and now having been in this position so long, it's one of the realities of government that I think, at least for me, I've had to accept, that change comes slowly, and it's hard to make big changes quickly. Now, the positive on that is that I think, regardless of who's in power, there's only so much change that you can make. I mean, there was things that happened in the Trump administration that were changed when in the Biden administration. There's different focus, and yes, that has changed some of the focus in some ways, but you're really only probably changing about 10% of the organization. Most things are consistent. And I really think it's up to us, the career staff, to really make those consistent long-term changes. And it's why I have focused so much, particularly on employee experience, things like diversity and inclusion and burnout, and making this a positive environment. The politicals can't really do that. We have to do that as careers. And so I'm trying to create programs that are going to last through administrations, that are going to be, long lasting, and, and really have a positive long-term impact on the agency. And ultimately, I think it's up to us, because I've been sitting in this chair and been the acting administrator in the last two administrative changes, as new politicals have come in, and you get this whiplash of new priorities. And it's like, okay, all of a sudden things change, but our day-to-day stays the same. And what we do as careers, I think, makes the biggest difference. So I think all of us should feel empowered. I hope everyone on this call feels empowered to try to make NOAA a better place. And it's really up to us, ultimately.
Great. Thank you so much, Ben. It's have been very informative, and I hope everybody enjoy his talk. Thank you all that support and make these seminars possible. And thank you to the online audience and for participating today. And we'll see you next time. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you. Have a good day, everyone.